As long as Christ hasn't returned yet, the enemy will make effort to trap you in some kind of pattern or cycle. That is what he is doing. That's the only thing he can do, and that's the only thing he will be doing until Christ returns. As long as you're in this body, whether you'll be here still when Christ has returned or your body would have expired, as long as you're in this body and Christ has not returned yet, you will face tribulation. And this is how it goes. When you become born again, you are recreated. Then you are renewed in your mind. So now your mind reflects the mind of Christ. You can't have the mind of Christ literally because you can't handle the mind of Christ. He's too big for you. But you can figuratively have the mind of Christ by reflecting the mind of Christ. And when you reflect the mind of Christ, you're able to operate in the power of the Holy Spirit. Okay? Now when you're operating in the power of the Holy Spirit, demons will send agents after you. Those agents are other evil spirits that will use people to trap you in some type of anxiety. Remember what I told you about a car. When you're driving a car, you have those two mirrors at each side, and you have a third mirror inside the car. Without those three mirrors, you're not allowed to drive a car. If a police officer sees you driving a car lacking one of those mirrors, he will stop you and you can even end up in jail. And your driver's license can be taken away from you. Why? Because you need those mirrors to reflect back on what's behind you. For example, in this mirror here, you see the reflection of what's behind the driver. And what's behind the vehicle is a police car that comes after him. While he's driving, his brain will capture this reflection, and he will then look at the mirror and see, oh, there's a police car coming after me. Or let's say it's a drunk driver. Someone is driving out of control here and there. His brain will capture the reflection. Also, you can see, oh, there's a drunk driver on the road. I need to get to the side, lest a car accident happens. By reflecting on what's behind him, the driver, let me say, he escapes danger. Or better said, he can anticipate danger. Because if a driver would drive and he wouldn't look in the mirrors at all, he wouldn't even pay attention to the reflections, he could get into a lot of trouble without being aware of it. But don't you know that a lot of folks want to be like that? Just staring what's in front of them, not paying attention to what's besides them, nor reflect on what's behind them. When you're driving a car or when you're participating in traffic, you can't do that. That's very dangerous. But when it comes to daily life, that's how a lot of folks are. Unfortunately, many believers also. Look, you're not turning your head and look behind you. No, you're not looking back, you're reflecting back. Because you're still looking forward because you're going forward, but you need to pay attention to the reflection of the past because you need to reflect on the past. Not because you're meditating on the past, but you're reflecting on it. It's not only bad things that happened in the past, also good things happened. But when people think of the past, sometimes think about only bad things you don't want to think about. No, there are also good things that happened in the past. But what's more important than the good and the bad things are the patterns. Okay? Whenever the enemy wants to trap you, he will seek to trap you in a pattern. It's the only thing he has. He wants to trap in a pattern because then you'll operate in a cycle without being aware of it. And it's in that cycle that you can be easily destroyed. Often the cycle itself is self-destructive. So you participating in a cycle will destroy you over time. Over time. On the short term, you probably won't notice it. Here, in this image, it's just a police car, some authority figure that comes after this driver. Maybe because he missed a traffic sign, or maybe he was speeding, maybe he drove too fast. I don't know what was going on there. Or maybe it's just an act, people enact this. But when it comes to the spiritual, because I'm using this image as a parable, when it comes to the spiritual, that's what demons do. They send quote-unquote authority figures after you to trap you. I'm not talking about the police. I'm not talking about directly the government. I'm talking about people you consider to be authority figures. People you consider to be important to you. The enemy will often use them because they're the ones you consider authority. They're the ones you're vulnerable to. So when the enemy wants to trap you, he needs to get a hold of your vulnerability. And the only way for the enemy to get a hold on your vulnerability is by using people to whom you are vulnerable. So the people that you're vulnerable to, that you consider important and relevant because you're dealing with them, they are the ones the enemy often will use to trap you in a state of anxiety. Now, the enemy will not use everyone that you are in contact with. He will not use everyone you're vulnerable to. He will only use those that you're vulnerable to, that you consider an authority. If you're vulnerable to someone, but you don't consider an authority, the enemy doesn't have much grip on that situation. For example, let's say you have a boss at work, but you don't consider him an authority figure. You're only there to do your administrative work and then you're gone. The boss doesn't have much to do with you than handing documents to you. But the opinion and how the boss thinks of you doesn't matter to you. So if your boss gets out of line one day, it doesn't affect you that much because you don't consider him an authority figure. If it is your spouse, or maybe not your spouse direct, maybe your father-in-law, or maybe some friends that you know from high school, or maybe a celebrity, whoever, if there's someone else you're vulnerable to, you're vulnerable in a different way, and they are an authority figure onto you, they don't have to be an authority figure in themselves, but if they are an authority figure onto you, the enemy can use them to trap you. For example, let's say that you decide, you know what, I've never been to the south of Europe before, let me book a trip to Italy. Because you want to expand yourself. Now, the demons see that you're leaving a cycle. Because you didn't used to travel that much, and you're not really used to socializing much with other people. You have a few people you're interacting with, and that's it. Now that you want to expand yourself, your options will grow, your opportunities will increase, and your impact will increase. And demons don't want this. So what happens then? Let's say you want to book a trip to Italy. Suddenly, you may have an uncle that tells you, hey Frank, let's say your name is Frank, I will organize a barbecue for the family on the 4th of July. Will you come? But then you tell him, but I can't because I'll be in Italy then. And then your uncle tells you, come on, it's family. We need to spend some time together. Now what's going on here? Where did this idea come from to organize a barbecue out of the blue? It didn't come from your uncle. The demon saw that you would go to Italy and that you would increase your social capital over there. And once you increase your social capital, after you returned, you would look back and you would realize, hold on a minute. I've been operating in a very restrictive manner. I don't want this anymore. So now you see through the cycle. And demons don't want you to see through the cycle because demons want you trapped in the cycle so they can exploit you. So now you have an authority figure that is your uncle. And because he has such a social charisma on the family, people tend to get along with him. So if you don't attend that barbecue, people are going to blame you. So after you return from Italy, you're going to feel the contention in the family. And because you don't want the contention, you probably either would cancel your trip to Italy or you will make some excuses. But in any case, now you feel discomfort. What's going on? It's not really your uncle. It's the unclean spirits that are using your uncle to hinder you. But let's say now this happened just one time. Okay, at least according to you. But then you have a friend of yours whom you know for a while. You don't speak to him every day, but he tells you, Frank, haven't you noticed that every time you make a plan to visit another country or to have a city trip somewhere else, every time you plan to travel, some relative of yours comes with some kind of plan to hinder you? Haven't you noticed that by now? And then you think back, and then the friend tells you, Frank, listen, 3 years ago you wanted to go to Britain, and you went eventually. Did you remember how much fights there were afterwards with your parents? And after when you asked your parents why they were upset, they couldn't even explain it to you, but they were just upset? Have you noticed that last year when you were in Greece, suddenly your half-brother, let's say, he came with all kinds of stories, of rumors in the family, all of that, while you were on holiday? So you were relaxing over there and he comes with all kinds of bad stories. And now this happens with your uncle? Frank, don't you see there's a pattern here? Don't you see that there's some kind of power or force that wants to keep you trapped with these people? Not that I say there's anything wrong with these people, but it is as if there's some power or some authority figure that doesn't want you to move forward, nor develop, nor expand. Think about it, Frank. And then let's say you're Frank, and then you realize, hold on a minute, that's true. That's why it's important to reflect back. When it comes to financial difficulties also. Examine when you had most financial difficulties. If they were at moments when you wanted to expand and increase, then you realize it's a paranormal thing. It's a paranormal operation. Or let's say now that, for example, you were in college and you didn't have much cash back then, but you didn't bother, you were studying, you had a part-time job. Now you are out of college, now you have your own part-time business. Because you don't want to go full-time for your own business because you are taking a risk, but you don't want to gamble. Now suddenly, you have those former fellow students of the opposite sex that begin to add you on Facebook and they begin to talk to you out of the blue. And they talk about their personal issues all the time. Now ask yourself the following. Why are they doing it right now? Hold on a minute. When you were in college, they saw you, they didn't even bother with you, as if you didn't exist to them. Why now that you have your own business, if you know it's a part-time business and you have extra income, suddenly they appear? It is because the enemy sends them to hinder you. The enemy doesn't want you to benefit of your prosperity, so the enemy wants you to waste your prosperity on those that don't mean you any good. Because those women are sent by the enemy, they want relief, and if you fall for the trap, you will be give them relief, and you will be helping them financially, and maybe you'll even get involved with one of those women in a relationship, and she'll end up draining you, draining your finances, and after your finances are drained, she suddenly falls out of love, and you hear that suddenly she's with someone else. What happened? She was sent by the enemy to drain you and to hinder you. I'm telling you, it's important to reflect back. It's important to look at the bigger picture. It's important to see the context. The enemy will use authority figures. With authority figures, they don't really have to be people you invest emotionally in. Anyone that's relevant to your daily life, though to your human vulnerability, can be an authority figure. It doesn't have to be the mayor or the president of your country. Anyone you're vulnerable to, close to you or a bit far off, that can have a relevant impact on your life, the enemy will seek to use them. The enemy can't use all of them. He can't. Someone that's born again, in agreement with Christ, the enemy can't use them. Okay? But if you have a believer that still has thinking patterns that don't add up and they're close to you, the enemy can use them. And because you think they are a believer, so you prioritize them, but you don't examine them, they can be used against you. I mean it. Check the context. Well, that's it for now. Keep agreeing with Christ and be at peace.